The George Washington College of Professional Studies Paralegal Studies programs are a proud sponsor of the DC Bar. You'll study with the nation's leading experts and get the critical knowledge and skills you need to enter legal, corporate, healthcare, or government practice with confidence and acumen. Whether you are looking to advance in your career or make a change, GW's academic rigor is matched with hands-on, real-time learning that will help you stand out among your peers and rise to the next level in your profession. To request more information about this program, please visit the link found in the description for this episode.
Hi, everyone. This is Let's Brief It, a podcast by law students for law students, and this time it's going to be about law students. I am Sydney Taylor.
I am Niranjan Seshadri.
I'm Andrew Nettels.
And I'm Eric Tarosky.
And in this special episode, we're going to really just be talking about ourselves and our experiences.
So to kick off this conversation, I think we should all talk about what brought us to the DC Bar podcast. I think it's really important for law students to look for opportunities outside the boundaries of their law school campus and to get involved in the legal community. So I'll start just by saying when I came to law school, I'm a current 1L. I knew what bar associations were generally, and I sort of Googled local bar associations of Virginia, Maryland, and DC, and went to the DC Bar website and knew I wanted to become involved in some way. And I just sort of reached out to Jessica and immediately was interested in doing the podcast.
Yeah, it's been a great experience. At Georgetown, it's a really big law school, lots of students. It's easy to get lost. And unless you are proactive in networking and trying to meet people, it can get challenging. And I'm really thankful to the DC Bar for making this platform available to us. It's been a great year interviewing a diverse set of people with lots of experience in various fields. I think I've learned a lot, met a lot of good people, and it's been overall a great experience.
Yeah, the DC Bar actually came to me in one of our many, many emails that come to us during the day at my law school. And thankfully, I actually, noticed this one and decided to go ahead and apply. And it's really been just such an amazing opportunity ever since from start to finish. And I've gotten to learn so much about international law and different careers within international law and beyond. And it's really been amazing. And I would definitely recommend it to anyone who's interested.
My story is similar to Sydney's and a little less deliberate, perhaps, than you, Andrew, and Niranjan, you as well. I was actually in a clinic through Georgetown in the fall that is part of an organization that is kind of housed within the DC Bar. And through that, I ended up joining the student bar and saw the advertisement for hosts in an email. So that's what led me here. I think that something I've learned, so I'm a 3L, the end is in sight for me about 2 weeks or so, and I'll be done with classes officially. But something that stood out to me about my time in law school is how willing people are to take time to talk with you and to help you as a law student. The legal profession obviously is one that is characterized by, busy people, important people. So that was something that I didn't necessarily know was going to be such a prevalent piece of the community. And then both as it relates to reaching out to guests to come on to our show on the podcast, and also just personally reaching out to attorneys who are, doing something interesting, working somewhere interesting that I wanted to learn more about. I've just been really surprised by how generous people are with their time, especially when you tell them you're a law student and you want to learn about, X, Y, and Z, or, whatever the cool thing is they're doing. So that's something that, kind of looking back on my 3 years of law school, I would encourage anyone to take the jump and to send the email to someone you're interested in talking to. I did it a few times with low expectations and have been just consistently pleasantly surprised at how willing people are to talk and to help. And I've, like Niranjan said, gotten to meet some really, really cool people by doing that, otherwise I probably wouldn't have.
Even within the law school environment, what surprised me the most was how approachable all our professors have been. A lot of them are legal luminaries, so well known in the legal world, but then you go and ask them what to me may sound like a stupid question, but to them, there's no stupid question, and they're willing to give you their time and their expertise. And it's been overall a positive experience and very welcoming.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo that. I mean, all it takes is literally one. Just shoot your shot, send out that informational interview. What's the worst that's going to happen? They're not going to reply to you. Just email 100 other people, and I'm sure like 5 of them will respond to you. And also just finding those interests, culminating them outside of academic topics. It's really a great idea to have something to go into an interview with that's not just law related. For me, every single interview that I've gone into, my extracurricular activities, even including being on this podcast, has been the topic of interest. There are so few interviews for law positions that I've had where the focus was on substantive responsibilities of the actual job. For example, I was at an event the other day and talking to an actual judge, and I was talking about how I wanted to go and do my scuba diving certification this summer, and she had done her scuba diving certification. And so that became the entire conversation, and it just made it a lot easier to connect with that judge. In terms of applying for jobs as well, it's really important to, apply for jobs that you don't think you're going to get. I mean, even if you just get to an interview and you don't end up getting the job, the interview itself is such an important experience.
Yeah, really just interviewing as much as possible can really only help you in the end. I mean, there's going to be like a certain amount of rejection that you have to take, but really it just ends up A, making you a better interviewer, B, making you tougher. And then, you also end up finding that the most quote unquote perfect interviews that you give, sometimes those are the ones where you aren't chosen. And then the ones where, you think, oh my goodness, this absolutely tanked. Those end up being, your best opportunities. And eventually you come to the conclusion like, oh, it's not me, it's them, as far as really just what the group is looking for. You either fit or you don't. And it's really not a personal thing. And that's something that's really important to start to learn as you get into interviewing for jobs and internships.
Cindy, I think it's a great point. It brings to mind something that I've been thinking a lot about recently. Law school, and I mean, the law in general and law school in particular is such an hyper competitive environment at times that I think we've all undoubtedly felt the general pressure that brings, and also the pressure to kind of be perfect and not to make mistakes or not to admit when you don't know things. And that's, an easy temptation to fall into in the environment. So I've been thinking a bit about that, reflecting back on, the last 3 years. And something in particular I was thought of that might be fun for us all to talk about was Niranjan made a comment a second ago about, there not being any stupid questions, which I agree with. But I do think I can point to a few moments where I learned something maybe that was super obvious that perhaps I should have known before, but these little things about being a law student that get lost in the weeds sometimes because of all the bigger things we're learning about. I remember 1L year, nobody told me where to find page numbers in Westlaw. And I remember being in my legal practice class and we're going through, blue book citation and pin cites. And the professor kept talking about, citing the pin site, citing to the page at which the proposition or quote appears. But here I am, of course, looking at Westlaw on a website, and I had no idea what the page numbers were. And I'll admit I was too embarrassed to ask. I just assumed that I should know and everybody else knew. And I kind of kept my head down. And eventually I figured out to look for the little blue star in the number. And that was the page number. So, fortunately got that one under control. But I since have talked to friends years later, and they've said the same thing when I've told that story about like, oh, I had no idea either. I had to Google that. So I think all of the, big and confusing and tough things that we're expected to learn and know in law school are certainly important. Sometimes the little things get looked over. And I think it's important, whether it's a big thing or a little thing, not to be afraid to, put your hand up and just say, hey, I'm lost on this, or I need a little bit more help, whether it's, page numbers or something else.
Yeah, when I came to law school, I was a little afraid at first because I tend to be more introverted at times. And I decided that I would speak up in class at any opportunity that I got. And that's really helped me. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've asked questions that, in retrospect, the answers are obvious. But that helped me engage with the material, connect with the professor, as well as get over my own fear of public speaking, which I think is a very important component of a lawyer's job as communication. Also, just reading the cases and reading the opinions of these great erudite judges who've written fantastic opinions, just reading the language they use and how they use it has really, really helped me in being more analytical and help with critical thinking skills.
I probably had dumb questions at some point, but I probably blocked it. But also, I just believe that, a lot of people are paying like crazy amounts of money for a legal education. So really, if you have the opportunity to sit in front, ask whatever questions you want, really even treat this session as if it is a private session and ask all the questions that you want, I think that you should do it. I mean, anyone who knows me in class knows that I speak up a lot. I ask a lot of questions. I'll even give my opinions or whatever I want because I mean, this is my education and I want to get the most that I possibly can out of it. So definitely don't be afraid to ask those questions because every time that I've felt a little bit hesitant about asking something, either the professor's like, oh, great question, or someone is like, oh, yeah, I had that question too. So you're not alone.
And generally, nobody remembers the bad cold calls or things like that. I remember really flopping a cold call during my first semester and being internally mortified. And I barely remember, Sydney, to your point, what the question was or what I said wrong. And I guarantee, no one else does either. So sometimes you just got to shrug those off and push on.
Yeah, I mean, definitely echoing that. There really is no such thing as a stupid question. I think if a day passes by and you don't have a question and you're not, presented with a topic that you don't really know much about, I think it's been an unproductive day every single day. We're supposed to be learning something new. And looking back at the best and I guess the not best professors I've had throughout my life, I would say that the best professors have been ones that have nurtured my analytical curiosity. When I'm going off topic a little bit, I go to office hours, and when I'm, thinking about something that isn't necessarily in the lesson, supporting that creativity, that's what a good professor would do. You shouldn't be afraid of being curious about things outside of the subject that you're learning. You should always be interested in learning more.
And looking back at my law school life so far, one thing that I was pleasantly surprised about was the cold calls. They weren't as intimidating as they were made out to be before I got into law school. And a lot of the professors, they want to encourage you to speak up, encourage you to ask questions. I find it a fairly welcoming classroom environment to engage with the classmates and professors. I don't know about you all. Have you had any bad experiences with cold calls or good experiences?
I've seen some pretty scary cold calls, but when I came into law school, I think I approached it with the idea that no one was really going to scare me. So even if I had a scary professor or something, I knew that I knew the material. I knew that I was ready for class. And sometimes you just have to show no fear. Sometimes they can smell it and they're going to prey on it because, I mean, they want to get you ready to be possibly called out in front of a judge or be possibly called out in court. Really, it's for your preparation and, whether or not this is productive to the legal profession. I mean, that's kind of a debate for another day, but they are trying to prepare you for what's out there. And really, you just have to say, okay, well, nothing's going to scare me today, and approach it with that kind of attitude.
Yeah, I had one experience where I did the completely wrong reading for the class. I think it was a con law class, and a lot of the cases have similar names. So the professor asked me, so what happened in New York versus XYZ? I used a completely different case that I'd read. And I spoke for about 3-4 minutes, and the professor was confused. And there was pin drop silence in the class. And that's when I realized I had done the wrong reading. And I just apologized and said, I'm sorry. It's an unforced error on my part. And he moved on.
Yeah, I think some of the more inventive cold calls that I've heard or have even done myself have been those where you've done the wrong reading or your interpretation of the reading was not what the professor was looking for, which is pretty much every single cold call ever. Professors are constantly trying to look at the gray areas that it's difficult for students to consider. I think the memorable cold calls have been those where, the person receiving the cold call is like, you know what, that is a good question. I'm not entirely sure, but this is how I would go about approaching that issue. Those have been some really memorable cold calls. And also learning how to improvise during an actual cold call is super important, especially as you're a 1L and you're starting to do oral arguments in moot court. It's just a great skill to have.
I loved doing oral arguments. I was really on my stuff at that point. So what are some of your favorite moments or favorite assignments from law school so far?
I tend to like the written assignments where I can take my time and then write my argument. My least favorite is being put on the spot under time pressure, especially the finals when you have a 3 hour final and you got so much and it's an open book, you got so much material. Or you've got 2 minutes and you've got to make a pitch or persuade, let's say, a mock or testimony in front of Congress. So I don't like that time pressure. So if I had more time to think and deliberate, it makes life easier. But I realize as a lawyer, we're all going to be under some degree of a time crunch. So in that sense, it's good training for us.
This might be cheating the question a little bit because I don't know that it was a discrete assignment that you perhaps had in mind, but my favorite thing that I've done in law school really has been the clinic that I participated in last fall, which, I'll use this as my chance to plug experiential learning generally. I think that it is the best way that you can learn what it's like to be a lawyer and learn the law and learn all of the things that maybe you don't learn from a casebook in law school. So I always tell anyone who will listen to seek out those opportunities. The clinic particularly that I worked in was in DC landlord tenant court. And I had many chances to, work with the clients who are coming to us for help, interview them, understand their situation, investigate the facts and learn the law. And then also stand up and, actually argue on behalf of a client in front of, a real life judge in the flesh and robe in court. And that was a thrilling experience, for me personally. I want to go into litigation. So that was right in line with what I'm looking to do. And just the learning aspect of it was tremendous. One of the biggest wins was we had a client facing some pretty bad housing situations and some pretty bad behavior on the landlord's part. And we ended up filing for a temporary restraining order in Superior Court, and it was granted by the judge. So it was neat to see, all of these things that you learn about in civil procedure as a 1L, kind of as abstract concepts, how they actually work and the outcomes that they can generate in court and for, real life clients. So maybe not necessarily a one-off assignment, but I personally would be remiss if I didn't plug experiential learnings clinics to anyone who's listening to this and thinking about it. It's absolutely worth your time.
How competitive are the clinics to get into?
I can really only speak to Georgetown. I know every school does things a little bit differently. At Georgetown, there was certainly a lot of interest. They also have a very robust clinic program, which was a selling point of the school for me. So the school does a very good job, I think, of trying to make sure that anybody who wants to participate in a clinic has the chance to. My experience was in court, but there's a whole bunch of clinics too that are not litigation focused. They're more, either community outreach or research. So there's a number of different options to satisfy different interests. And like I said, can only talk about Georgetown, but I think they do a really good job of trying to give people those chances if you want them and are proactive about pursuing them.
So we've covered classes, extracurriculars, but what about working while in law school? What are your experiences, or are you full-time students?
I think it's only fair to redirect this question right back at you, Dr. Seshadri. I personally cannot begin to fathom balancing cardiothoracic surgery and reading for con law at the same time. So maybe you're the best person to lead us off on that.
Well, for me, I came into law school late in life, and I look at it as a second chance of doing it right in a way, because my first go around studying and going through training was more in terms of like, where's the light at the end of the tunnel, go, 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 and it was stress filled. But I'm taking a different perspective of law school. For me, it's more of how can I learn? Like Sydney mentioned earlier, we're paying a lot of money to get solid legal education, and it's in our best interest to engage with the material, read and show up to classes and learn. And there's really no spoon feeding in law school. It's on you to learn the material. There's plenty of support. People are willing to support you, but you've got to put in the effort. So I see it from the perspective of how can I manage work and study? From a physician's perspective, Andrew mentioned this earlier, there's never a day when you're not learning something new. So as long as you keep that mindset and just keep chugging along. And it's funny that I say this, but I don't want the law school experience to end. Because once I'm done with being a law student, it's just what am I going to do next is the big question that I have for myself.
I think that's a great question for all of us, actually. So, what are we looking to do next?
Well, Eric's a 3L, so maybe we can put him on the spot and ask him.
Niranjan, you've inspired me. I'm going to medical school.
Me too.
Completely joking for so many reasons, but I do share your sentiment about law school is hard and stressful at times, but I really did on the whole enjoy the process. So I'm excited to be concluding this chapter, but there's a bit of bittersweetness to it looking back. That said, I am really excited to actually get into practice and do the thing. So for me, I will be graduating next month. I'll be taking the DC bar in July, which I'm sure will be a fun time. And then I'm going to the litigation practice in Kirkland and Ellis here in DC. So I'll be joining them this fall.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Thanks. It's very exciting to, like I said, have the end in sight and to be a, quote unquote, real lawyer here soon, hopefully.
Well, it looks like we're almost out of time, and it was great chatting with Eric, Andrew, and Sydney. This is Let's Brief It, the official podcast of the DC Bar, sponsored in part by the George Washington University Paralegal Studies program. For more information on that program, please see the description to this episode.
The DC Bar law student community strives to engage and support law students before you graduate and expose you to the tangible benefits of joining the DC Bar and DC Bar communities. Curated programming allows law students to participate in substantive content programming, leadership trainings, networking with practicing attorneys in fields of interest, writing opportunities, and other activities designed to expand your legal education beyond the classroom. Make an investment in your legal career by joining the law student community. To learn more, visit us at www.dcbar.org or email communities@dcbar.org. We look forward to hearing from you.